welcome to my vlog. And now we'll be talking about prominent African authors and their significant literary works. And East African literature, South Central African literature, and South African literature and politics. West African literature, Chinua Achebe. He published Things Fall Apart in 1958. Amos Tutula. He published The Palm Winding Card in 1952. My Life in the Bush of Ghosts 1954. Simba in the Stray of the Dark Jungle 1955. The Brave African Huntress 1958. Father Woman of the Jungle 1962. Ajayi in His Inherited Poverty 1967. The Witch Herbalist of the Remote Town 1981. Popper 1987. Brawler and Slanderer 1987. Cyprian Iquenzi. He published People of City 1956. When Love Whisper 1948. Murder at the Taba Roundabout 1962. Samankwe and the Highway Robbers 1975. Jagwanana 1961. Beautiful Fathers 1963. Iska 1966. Survive the Peace 1976. Divided We Stand 1980. Timothy Mafoloronsa. He published One Man, One Wife in 1959. One Man, One Machete 1964. Kinsman and Foreman 1966. Chief, The Honorable Minister 1970. Wrong One in the Dock 1982. Gabriel Okara. He published The Voice in 1964. Chukwemeka Ike. He published Toads for Supper 1965. The Naked Gods 1970. The Potter's Wheel 1974. Sunset at Dawn 1976. The Chicken Chaser 1980. X-Bone 77 1980. The Bottled Leopard 1985. All Children Are Coming 1990. The Search 1991. Flora Nwapa. She published Eferu 1966. Edu 1969. One is Enough 1981. Women Are Different 1986. Never Again 1992. Elechi Amadi. He published The Concubine 1966. The Great Ponds 1969. The Slave 1978. Estrangement 1986. John Mononye. He published The Only Son 1966. Obi 1969. Bridge to the Wedding 1978. Oilman of Obanhe 1971. A Wreath for Maidens 1973. A Dancer of Fortune 1974. Ama Ata Aidu. She published Our Sister Killjoy or Reflections from a Black-Eyed Squint 1969 and Changes 1991. Festus Iyayi. He published Violence 1979, Contract 1982, and Heroes 1986. Cole Omatso. He published Just Before Dawn 1988, The Sacrifice 1974, The Scales 1976, and In the Place of Curse 1976, Shadows in the Horizon 1977, Even Fellow's Choice 1974, and Combant 1972. Saro Wiwa. He published Soza Boy, a novel in rotten English 1985, Songs in a Time of War 1985, On a Darkening Plain, An Account of Nigerian Civil War 1989, A Forest of Flowers 1987, Adaku in Other Stories 1989, Prisoners of Jabs 1988, Bassi and Company, A Modern African Folktale 1987, Bassi and Company for Television Plays 1988, Mr. B Goes to Lagos 1989, Mr. B Again 1989, The Transistor Radio 1989. Silchune Coker. He published The Last Harmattan of Alucin Dunbar 1990. Ben Okri. He published Flower and Shadow 1980, The Landscape Within 1981, The Famished Road, 1991, and Songs of Enchantment, a novel, 1993. Buchi Emecheta. She published The Bride Price, 1976, The Joys of Motherhood, 1979. Ayikwe Arma. He published The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born, 1908, Fragments, 1978, Why Are We So Blessed, 1972, The Healers, 1978, 2000 Seasons, 1973, Osiris Rising, A Novel of Africa, Past, Present, and Future, 1995. Miriam Ba. She published So Long a Letter in 1981. Sembeni Osmani. He published God's Bits of Wood in 1962. East African Literature. Grace Ogot. She published The Promised Land 1966, The Island of Tears 1980, Land Without Thunder 1968, The Other Woman 1976, The Graduate 1980, Mihaya 1983. Samuel Kahiga. He published Potent Ash 1968, The Girl from Abroad 1974, When the Stars Are Scattered 1979, and Flight to Tuva 1979. Peter Palangio. He published Dying in the Sun 1968. Okello Okuli. He published Orphan 1968, Prostitute 1968, Malak 1977, and Kukalem 1976. Robert Serumaga. He published Return to Shadow 1969. Gabriel Ruhumbika. He published Village in Uhuru 1969. Nuruddin Farah. He published From a Crook Rib 1970, A Naked Needle 1976, Sweet and Sour Milk 1979, Sardines 1981, Closed Sesame 1983, Mops 1986. Charles Mangua. He published Son of Woman in 1971. Austin Bokenya. He published The People's Bachelor in 1972. Peter Nazareth. He published In a Brown Mantle 1972 and The General is Up 1991. Meja Mwangi. He published Carcass for Hounds 1974, Taste of Death 1977, Kill Me Quick 1973, Going Down River Road 1976, The Cockroach Dance 1979, and Weapon of Hunger 1989. Rebecca. She published Ripples in the Pool 1975, Kenyan Woman Heroes and Their Mystical Power in 1984. Abdul Razak Gurna. He published Memory of Departure 1987, Pilgrim's Way in 1988, Doti in 1990, Paradise in 1994, and Admiring Silences in 1996. M.G. Vasanji. He published The Ganisak in 1989, The Book of Secrets in 1984, The In-Between World of Vikram Lal in 2003. Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He published A Grain of Wheat in 1967, Petals of Blood in 1977, and Matagari in 1989. South Central African Literature. Atwell Sidwell. He published Blanket Boy's Moon in 1951. David Rubadiri. He published No Bride Price in 1967. Aubrey Kachingwe. She published No Easy Task in 1966. Lagson Kayira. He published I Will Try in 1965, The Looming Shadow 1968, Jingala in 1969, The Civil Servant in 1971, and The Detainee in 1974. Dominic Malaisho. He published The Tongue of the Dumb in 1971, The Smoke That Thunders in 1979. Dambudso Marichera. He published House of Hunger 1978, Black Sunlight 1980, The Black Insider 1990, Mythos or the Definitive Body in 1984, Cemetery of Mind in 1992. Shimmer Chinodia. He published Dew in the Morning 1982, Farad's Girls in 1984, Harvest of Thorns in 1989. Janjarahov. He published Bones 1988, Shadows 1991, Sheban Tales in 1994, Ancestors in 1996. Sitsi Dangangramba. She published She No Longer Weeps in 1987, Nervous Conditions in 1988. South African Literature and Politics. William Plomer. He published Turbot Wolf in 1926. Percival Gibbon. He published Margaret Harding in 1911. Sarah Gertrude Millen. She published God's Stepchildren in 1924. Dlomo. He published An African Tragedy in 1928. Modique Dikob. He published The Marabi Dance in 1973. Peter Abraham. He published Mine Boy and Alan Paton's Cry, The Beloved Country in 1948. Richard Drive. He published The Emergency in 1964. Nadine Gordimer. She published The Late Borgia's World in 1966. The Conversationist in 1974. July's People 1981. Jacob's The Dawn Comes Twice in 1969. C.J. Driver's Elegy for a Revolutionary in 1969. Mary Benson's At the Steel Point in 1969. Alex La Guma. He published A Walk in the Night in 1962. Andre Brink. He published Looking on Darkness in 1974. Miriam Talley. She published Moriel at the Metropolitan in 1975 and Amandla in 1980. Sipu Sifalma. He published The Root is One in 1979 and Ride on the Whirlwind on 1981. Mangani Wali wrote. He published To Every Bird Its Blood in 1981. Mabelaloms Mane. He published My Cousin Comes to Joburg, Other Stories in 1981 and Children of Soweto in 1982. Dennis Brutus. He published Letters to Martha and Other Poems from a South African Prison in 1968. Zwelonke. He published Robben Island in 1973. Athol Fugard. He published The Island in 1973. Francis Carey Slater. He published Drought, a South African Parable in 1929, The Centenary Book of South African Verse in 1925, and The New Book of South African Verse in 1945. Roy Campbell and William Plomer. They published Vorslag in 1926, The Waves Goose in 1928, The Gorged in 1931, Turbot Wolf in 1926. Olive Emily Albertina Screener. She published The Story of an African Farm in 1883, From Man to Man, and Undine the Laughter, two published posthumously in 1926 and 1929, Woman and Laborer in 1911, Trooper Peter Halkett of Mashonaland in 1987. William Charles Scully. He published The Harrow in 1921, Kaffir Stories in 1985, The White Bomb Hetacomb, Other Stories 1897, by Veld and Kopje 1907, The Wreck of Grosvenor and Other South African. Douglas Blackburn. He published Prince Lusdorf, A Tale of Transvaal Officialdom by Sarel Erasmus in 1899, Birger Gisot 1903, Came and Saw 1908, Richard Hartley Prospector 1905, Souls in Bondage 1904. Sir Percy Fitzpatrick. He published Jack Bushveld 1907, Through Mashonaland with Pick and Pan 1892, The Outspan Tales of South Africa 1897, Transvaal from Within, A Private Record of Public Affairs in 1899. William Charles Franklin Plomer. He published Turbo Wolf in 1926, Double Lives in 1943, At Home in 1958, The Autobiography of William Plomer in 1975, The South African Autobiography in 1984, I Speak of Africa in 1927. Pauline Smith. She published The Beetle in 1926, The Little Karoo in 1925, Plotkopp's Children in 1935. Sir Lawrence John van der Post. He published In a Province in 1934, Flamingo Feathers in 1955, The Hunter and the Whale in 1967, A Story Like the Wind in 1972, A Far Off Place 1974, The Lost World of Kalahari in 1958. Alan Paton. He published Cry the Beloved Country in 1948. Bessie Head. She published When Rain Clouds Gather in 1968. Thank you for listening and watching. I hope you enjoyed and learned something on my vlog. That will be all, everyone. Bye!